People are taking over $500,000 losses on houses. There are power of sales happening everywhere. And it's really just because of this giant bubble that has been built up because of all the malinvestment, because of all the speculation investors. Is the Canadian housing market going to enter the fear stage during 2025? That's what we're going to get into in this video. And I'm going to take you through the bubble cycle so you can understand where we are and where we're possibly going. At the end of the day, we use probabilities. There are no certainties, but there's a high degree of probability that in 2025, we're going to enter the fear and despair stage of the demise of the Canadian real estate bubble. Now, the Canadian real estate bubble, the effects of which have been very, very wide. So many people have already just had a wrecking ball which has swung through their wealth because it was all propped up on bad loans and easy lending standards. Now, funnily enough, the government has actually even tried to make lending standards even looser than they were before, believe it or not. I know it's insane, but this is the truth. The government has been embarking, trying to do different things to stimulate the housing market. But the housing market is in big trouble in Canada, and this is really bad for the economy because the economy has become heavily dependent on the housing bubble. Now, at the end of the day, this is all part of the cycle because you see what happens in the build-up to these cycles is everybody gets involved in the bubble because it's easy money. And one of the things about real estate compared to other bubbles is it's very emotional. And the thing is, that's what's key here. You've got to identify whether we're in a bubble or we're not in a bubble. And the easy way of doing that is looking at incomes in proportion to the amount people pay for the real estate. And when you start to do that and you start to just dig into the average income in places like Toronto and places like Vancouver, even when you look into places like Calgary, and actually average is pretty bad. You want to use the median because the median kind of takes out a lot of the noise that you see in the income data, because guess what? There's a lot of wealthy people who park their money in Alberta and they skew the numbers for the income, so it makes it look like Albertans earn a lot more money when in reality they earn a little more than places like Toronto and Vancouver. And guess what? That has been stagnating more than Toronto and Vancouver, and they're quickly catching up with places like Calgary and Edmonton. So over the next couple of years, you're probably going to see them overtake Alberta. So how do we know when we're in the fear stage of the real estate bubble? Well, you have to go back a stage and think, where were we before that? And what is the stage that you get before fear and despair? This is when people are crying and there's blood in the streets, and it actually, when you start to smell an opportunity, if you want to get into something that is inherently risky, because, if you're buying into even a bubble that is in its demise and it's in its final stages, you don't know whether you're catching a falling knife. This goes with stocks or any other investments that are in the bubble. It's really not limited to real estate. And that's why I want to get your mind away from real estate a little bit, because yes, it's emotional and people think it's property. I can't lose on property. But the thing is, when things get overvalued, yes, of course, you can lose on property. It doesn't matter whether you're in Canada, the United States, the UK, the Netherlands, France, Spain, Portugal. It doesn't matter where you are. If the real estate's in a bubble compared to average incomes, and when you look at who's mostly buying, it's mostly speculators and investors, well, guess what? Yeah, you're probably likely in a bubble. So the stage before the fear stage is actually the denial phase. And we've seen that play out for the past couple of years, and it could continue to play out. You can actually stay in that stage for a long time, especially when it comes to real estate, because more and more sellers will hold off selling. They'll think, oh, I'm going to get better pricing. Things are going to get better. The market's going to improve. Interest rates are coming down. But as we've discussed discussed on this channel many times, interest rates coming down is being offset by unemployment going up. And actually, unemployment going up is actually worse for real estate, even if interest rates are coming down. And most people don't understand that, because you start to get in this self-reinforcing cycle, which eventually brings on the fear cycle, where basically more and more people are put out of work. That starts to change sentiment. It affects spending habits. We're already beginning to see more and more people building up savings. Why is that? It's not because they have the money to do it. It's just because they're sensing that hard times are coming. And guess what? They're already here. I've been talking about it on this channel since 2021. And those of you that have followed along will have known many of my views, and many of the things that have come true have happened not because I'm some sort of genius, because guess what? I'm not. It's just because they were kind of obvious. For example, the Canadian dollar, I predicted that that was going to crash and go down in value for a number of years. And the reason was I was looking at other currencies and realizing that the Canadian dollar was actually overvalued when you compared it to things like the pound, things like the euro, which had got hammered. There was actually a divergence. The Canadian dollar did slightly better. And obviously now it's doing a lot worse. And those other currencies, guess what? They're doing bad, but they're not doing as badly as the Canadian dollar. The Canadian dollar has been a terrible performing currency. So the thing is, we know we went through that denial phase. So the next phase we're looking for is the beginning of fear. And as you've seen on this channel, and I've shown countless times, there are unbelievable losses that people are taking. So $685,000 loss. I mean, so on to another loss here. We've got complete mayhem in Mississauga. So you're talking about another 60% loss here in the Canadian real estate bubble and the Canadian housing market crash. You've got to follow Shazzy Goalie on Twitter. He's putting these out all the time. People are taking over $500,000 losses on houses. There are power of sales happening everywhere. And it's really just because of this giant bubble that has been built up because of all the malinvestment, because of all the speculation investors. And guess what? They're no longer there. That train has gone, it's crashed, and now there's nobody new arriving. In fact, the only people who can now save the Canadian real estate situation are going to be the home buyers. And guess what? They were priced out the market, so they can't afford it. So now you've got to see real estate prices revert back to fundamentals. Rents are falling, so that's not attractive to investors, even if home prices are falling. So the only people who are ironically going to save Canadian real estate are actually the people who have been priced out for years and years and years and still continue to be priced out. We've also seen over the past couple of years people moving outside of the cities, this push to move outside of the cities. There's all this remote work that happened during the pandemic. Guess what? A lot of those remote workers, they're being fired and being replaced with people in third world countries. If you don't have a legitimate skill and somebody can learn your job in 24 hours or just by doing an online course, then you should fear that you're probably going to lose your job, because the fact is that more and more companies are going to be making more and more cuts, because that's what happens during recessions. And those managers at the top, they want to keep their huge bonuses and massive salaries, and they would rather cut as many people as they can at the bottom, and that's exactly what happens. So 2025 is going to be an incredibly interesting year. We've also got the fact that it looks like there's going to be a financial crisis in 2025. There are so many things that are coming to head for the global economy and not just Canada. It just adds to Canada's woes that it has all these things going on, such as an immigration bubble, such as a housing bubble, and even a government bubble. And you know, as nice as it seems for people to envision a world without those bubbles, or a Canada without those bubbles, you do not get there without an extreme level of pain. And that is what I don't think people really realize or understand when they hear politicians that come on stage and they say, hey, yeah, we're going to shrink the government. Well, good luck with that. You go ahead and do it. And I think it's a good thing long term, but are you really being honest honest with the voters that there's going to be a lot of pain in between that long-term gain that you're going to get from it? No, of course they're not. The politicians are very good at gesturing, but they're not actually good at telling the truth, unfortunately. I don't care if you're liberal, NDP, Republican, Democrat, conservative. It doesn't really matter. It's all the same situation with these politicians. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd highly recommend this video here. And if you want to help support the channel, then get the best VPN, which is expressvpn.com/marketmania. You can also join our inner circle on buymeacoffee.com/marketmania. And I will see you in the next one. Take care.